Good evening. Welcome to the Costa Mesa Planning Commission meeting for Monday, March 11th, 2019. Call the meeting to order, and I ask Vice Chair Harlan to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Vice Chair Harlan. Julie, roll call, please.
Chair Dirickle.
Here.
Vice Chair Harlan.
Here.
Commissioner Navarro-Woods. Here. Commissioner Zick.
Here.
Commissioner Colbert.
Present.
Thank you, Julie. On tonight's agenda, we do not have any announcements or presentations, and so this brings us to public comment. To ensure fair and equal treatment of all who appear before the Planning Commission and to expedite city business, speakers may be limited to 3 minutes during public comments to speak on any item within the Planning Commission's jurisdiction which is not listed on the agenda this evening. This time may be extended for good cause by the chair or by a majority vote of the Planning Commission. Is there anyone tonight that wishes to speak during public comment? Yes.
Before I start, can you give me a second? The security guard out here never even looks up. He's always on his cell phone. And just to let you know, there was a couple having sex in the bushes right around the corner. Both sidewalks are blocked on both sides. I don't know where the police are, right here on Plummer Street. Don't just drive into the parking lot here, folks. Go around the block. They're doing lines of coke right over there, and they're blocking the sidewalk. And also, I'm asking when you have meetings here, I think you need a policeman out here. It's okay tonight because it's going to be short. But when it's late at night, I've actually twice had to come back in because of what's going on in the parking lot and have somebody walk me to my car. And I'm no scaredy cat. I've been around the block. But this isn't funny. Okay, now public comment. Okay. Is that okay? Can we just get some support here?
You're fine. So the staff will check with Chief Sharpneck, and we'll see.
Okay.
How that goes. Thank you.
So right down the street here. Okay, so we're getting harassed. The residents that come forward and speak out about sober living are getting harassed by the operators of the sober living houses. Keith Randall was driving by my house, taking pictures of my house, screaming at me, swearing at me, and then on Wednesday morning, I get another subpoena yet again by Zachy Burns to show up with a deposition. And they actually think that the city has hired me. This is my favorite part. They asked for a copy of the contract that I have with the city and how much I'm getting paid. I just thought you might find that really interesting. So then I just think, and of course it was about 7:15 in the morning, pounding on the door. It's just getting ridiculous. So then I'm driving down Irvine Boulevard, and here comes Keith Randall next to me. And I had these sunglasses on, so I just pretended that I ignored him. They're called cocoons, but you can kind of see out of the edge. And he's acting like a high school kid in American Graffiti, pulling forward, backing up, giving me the finger, swearing at me, screaming at me. Come on, you guys. Can you please get some protection? I know an elderly couple that protested on Orange Street about the one behind them, and the guys started throwing basketballs over the fence at them so the elderly gentleman cannot sit in his garden anymore. He's lived there for 50 years. Or how about the couple on Tulip? The wife had breast cancer and lung cancer, and the husband was begging them to stop smoking. And I know that doesn't bother you, Mr. Dirickle, but a lot of the people in Costa Mesa that have to live next to a sober living house, and you've got 30 guys smoking and vaping, it isn't funny. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Ms. Parker, I don't discount at all what your experiences are that you've mentioned tonight. I would strongly suggest you may have already done it. Oh, yeah. That if you feel, then file a report with the police department. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm just suggesting an avenue for you. Thank you. Might help if I turn the mic back on. Planning Commissioner comments and suggestions. Commissioner Zick, do you have any comments tonight?
I just had one comment, failed to bring it up last time.
In our package quarterly, we get from staff the sales tax information report from the finance department. I very much appreciate getting this, and I wanted to thank you for making sure you provide it to us.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Colbert?
No comment.
Okay, Commissioner Woods?
Yeah, you know, there was an email circulated last week, and there are a group of students at UC Irvine who have been, they're going to present a master's, I think it's a master's degree presentation, and their topic was creating community on the west side. So if any of you are interested, you can probably contact planning staff. Do you guys have that info handy? Yeah, I plan on attending, so I hope to see some of you guys there too.
Thank you. Vice Chair Harlan?
Oh, nothing tonight, thank you.
Okay. Just a couple of things. I do want to echo Commissioner Wood's comments. In fact, I think Councilmember Reynolds was circulating that. I plan on attending that too. It sounds interesting. I think they're providing some planning perspectives about the west side as well as part of that program, so I'm looking forward to that. I just wanted to also commend staff and city manager's office and the city council for kind of the Herculean work they've done in finding a facility to handle the city's homeless issues so that we'll have a kind of permanent shelter that seems to has satisfied Judge Carter, and in fact, indeed, the lawsuit brought against the city on the homeless issue has been settled. Hopefully, we can move on from it now. I think it's a good move. I think the property location is, I think, a pretty good one, and hopefully now we can move on to other longer-term planning issues. I look forward to doing that, but I did want to tip my hat to the council and everybody who worked very hard on getting a facility found and established, and also for the temporary facility at Lighthouse. So those are my comments for this evening. We do not have a consent calendar this evening, so that will take us then to public hearing number 1. And Julie, please read that.
Public hearing item number 1, planning application 18-47 and tentative track map 18034 for a 3-story mixed-use development within the 19 West Urban Plan area located at 752 and 756 West 19th Street. This is a call to report any ex parte communications.
Commissioners, any ex parte communications to report? Commissioner Zick.
I met with the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Woods.
I was contacted by the applicant, but did not meet with them.
Okay, Vice Chair Harlan.
Likewise, I had a communication from the applicant, but did not meet with him.
Okay, and Commissioner Colbert.
I met with the applicant at the project site on Friday.
Okay, thank you. And I, too, was contacted by the applicant, and I met with the applicant on March 7th, I believe, at the project site. Okay, Manu, you're up.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. If you just give me 1 second, get the slide going.
Sure, that's fine. And Manu, while you're doing that, I want to correct the record. I met with the applicant on March 5th, not March 7th.
Okay, thank you. The application before you this evening includes a planning application, which is an urban master plan to allow construction of a 3-story mixed-use development on a site that's C1 zone and within the 19 West Urban Plan. The request includes 2 deviations. One is a deviation from the minimum lot size. The minimum requirement is 1 acre, and the proposed site is 0.27 acre. The second deviation is from the overall parking standard requirement. 19 spaces are required, and the applicant has provided the required number of parking spaces, but in a different configuration. Tentative track map is also requested to subdivide the property as a 4-unit condominium development.
If you'll give us one moment, Commissioners, let us work out a kink here with the presentation.
Sure, take your time.
So the next couple of slides talks about the existing condition of the site. This is the site plan. It is located at the southeast corner of Wallace and 19th Street. It includes 2 parcels that have been consolidated, and also at the corner there was a dedication area that was rededicated back to the property owner. So this parcel includes 11,533 square feet. The zoning is C1, and it's also within the 19 West urban plan. This is, these 2 photos show the existing condition of the site. The structures on the site have been demolished, and the site is currently vacant, and there's a construction fence at the perimeter of the property. This site has had a few entitlement entitlement has been processed for this site. The first one was back in 2014. There was an urban plan screening. The master plan was reviewed by the Planning Commission. It included 5 live-work units that were detached, and that project was continued. It was not approved by the Planning Commission at the time. The property was then sold, and the new development plans were prepared. The revised project was again reviewed by the Planning Commission in 2018. The Commission denied the project with a 3-0 vote. Commissioners DeArco and Harlan were absent. The reasons that the project was denied was basically because of the number of the deviations. There was a separation between the entrance to the residence and the workspace. The waiver that was requested for undergrounding the utility poles, and the overall architecture of the project. The applicant again went before the City Council in 2018 and presented a new project, which is before you, which is similar to what's before you this evening. Includes 4 units, and it's a mixed-use project with 2 office units and 2 residential units. So this is a proposed site plan. It is a lot more compact than the other 2 versions of the projects. It includes 2 duplexes. Each duplex has a residential unit and an office unit, and they both are 3 stories in height. The parking configuration, basically open parking along the adjacent property to the north. The residential units each include a 2-car garage and a mechanical lift for a total of 3 parking spaces. There are carports on either side of the garages, and the carports include 3 total parking spaces, including an ADA stall. The arrows show the location of the entrances to the office units as well as the residential units. So this plan shows the ground level as how you enter into the residential unit as well as the office units. So the ground level for residential unit includes a 2-car garage and the stairway that goes to the 2nd and the 3rd level. And the office units are 2 levels, and the first level is shown here, and the second level would be the same as the second level for the residential unit, but they're completely separated. So this shows the second level of the office units and the second level of the residential units. And this slide shows the third level, which only includes the residential units. The residential units each have a large open deck. A part of it is covered and part of it is open. So the hatch area shows the open area of the decks. The proposed elevations, as you can see on this slide, is a contemporary style, but it has some durable finishes such as brick veneer, and solid metal roofing. The glazing in the front it shows a large storefront that's typical of an office use, and then on the upper level you have a smaller glazing that's typical of residential use. This is the side view from Wallace Street, and this is the corner view that shows them primarily this 2-story along 19th Street. The general plan requires that we include a shade and shadow study with any structure that's 3 stories and over. We did require this to be submitted. The proposal compared to the proposals in the past has much less impact to the properties to the north, and all the shade and shadow is pretty much contained on the property. As far as parking, I indicated the number of parking spaces that is provided: 10 open parking spaces, 3 carports, 2 mechanical lifts, and the code allows for 1 parking deviation when the site includes a bike rack. With respect to the urban plan standards, the site is 0.27 acres, so that's 1 deviation from the minimum lot size of 1 acre. The project meets the setbacks as far as the building setbacks on 19th Street and Wallace Avenue. The project proposes over 40% of open space, 27.5% is provided on the ground level, and on the upper decks and balconies there's 16.3% of open space. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission find that the project is categorically exempt under CEQA section 15332 for infill development and approval of the project. The applicant also has a presentation for you this evening, including a video that shows how the mechanical lift would work. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Manu, for your presentation. Commissioners, are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Zick.
Just one question. I noticed on one of the drawings that I received from the applicant, and I wasn't able to see it on your presentation, and that was a reference to a security gate in front of the carport stalls. I don't see any reference in the conditions of approval to the to a security gate in terms of it required to be open during business. So could you elaborate on whether or not the installation of a security gate is something that would be approved and under what condition?
Yes, we would be happy to add a condition that would restrict having any kind of gate during the business hours for the offices. Those are intended to be open parking spaces and available to the patrons at all times.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Zick. And just a quick follow-up, are the security gates, which are obviously intended to be closed in off hours, essentially is designed to preclude overnight parking or in those spaces?
And general security, I think, for any cars that may be parked in the parking spaces. I think the applicant originally intended to have some kind of security for the entire site, but the site plan does not allow for any kind of vehicular gate because of the size So this would be one security measure.
But the security gates are not, so the security gates aren't meant to protect residential parking because the residential parking is satisfied within the enclosed garages.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Colbert.
Does the city have a history with the mechanical parking configuration, those machines? Are there any other retail spaces that utilize that currently to reach parking?
As far as I know, this is the first one that's before the Planning Commission.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, I will open the public hearing and ask the applicant to come forward if you wish to make a presentation. I would ask that you state your name and address for the record, and also ask that if you have read the conditions of approval and if you agree with them.
My name is Bobby Kashani, and yes, I have read the conditions of approval.
Okay, thank you, sir. Please proceed.
Sure. Okay, so as you've seen, we have this 4-unit mixed-use project. I took over this project about 2 years ago from another developer that was doing a small lot, a 5-unit small lot project. We took over it, and last year we were not successful with this, city commission in regards to getting the approval to move forward. We had a chance to appeal it or potentially make some changes, but ultimately, we decided that, we should try to rework it, redesign, and come up with a more, a better plan that would be not objectionable by the city council or commission. So me and my architect, Bryce Adjourney, we put several months into it, and we came up with this plan, which we felt that, given all the recommendations and the concerns that the city had regarding the previous 5-unit small lot, we felt that this conformed and would alleviate pretty much most, if not all, of the issues that we previously had objections on. So with that said, this is kind of a unique structure, a unique plan design, because previously we had, I think, we had a parking a traffic count of probably, I think it was well over 160 units, 160 travels per day. With this, because office is low traffic, now it's come down to 54, which we basically made it a third. And by truncating the building, the project size from 2 separate structures to 1 single structure, we were able to overcome the open area requirements that were necessary, and we were able to also free up the parking that was necessary to accommodate such a smaller site such as this. We're confined with a crematorium right next to us, and we have an apartment complex right behind us. Neither one of those owners would be willing to sell, so we pretty much were kind of boxed in, and we just have no room to expand out. So with that said, we did this project knowing that, we can alleviate parking due to the fact that the office units, would only be operating from either 8 to 5 or 9 to 6, Monday through Friday. And a lot of the traffic would happen, weekends for residential units, as people have more free time coming in and out of their house, making the entire site, that back row parking, fully available to the residential units. And for the office parking, we have adequate and enough parking just because we believe that the demographic of buyers coming to buy the residential units would would pretty much, we would observe that they would be at work during the daytime. So they kind of almost like miss each other, okay? And this concept was really kind of born out of my own personal needs, because I have an office in Irvine, and I intended to build this project so I could occupy one of the units, and I would, in this case and scenario, I would occupy one of the office units and I'd keep one of the residential units, and I'd sell the others. So with that said, I looked inward as far as like what it would take to meet my own personal demands, because I would be remiss if I built something and then I had to battle with traffic. I mean, there's literally no parking on Wallace. I met with Commissioner Kandarius, and we literally like couldn't find parking. So that was a big issue, and I am not lost on that fact, and we wanted to make sure that parking was adequate, and I feel like this project is above adequate. So I'll take you through the slideshow. That is the site right there. The residential is highlighted in yellow, and the commercial is highlighted in blue on the site plan. Here's a little bit closer view of it, aerial view. Those are our parking spots. That was the previous plan right there. That was the previous site plan. That was the 5 small lot unit. You can see that having the building in the back with the 2 units and the 3, it very much limited how much parking you could have and open area compared to what we have now. So that's the rendering of the previous 5 unit small lot work live space versus the 2 office and 2 residential below. Just looks better altogether. This is our, we did kind of a rendering video so you can kind of get a good, almost video-like, how do we? Oh, Mina, you want to play it? Okay. So as you can see from the front elevation, the 2 residential units can be accessed through that middle section, which is clearly defined and differentiated with the gray stucco. And we made changes along the way to meet the city's recommendation in terms of like the elevation. We pulled back the 3rd floor, and we articulated the stucco and the brick so that way it was very visible and easily differentiate. You can easily differentiate between what's residential and what's office. From the rear, the office units, in this rendering we didn't capture it, but on the site plan and the floor plan you can see, sorry, it's going a little too fast. Those are the stackable, car stackable units. They're basically, they're about 9 foot wide. They are, because our first floor is 12 foot, we can easily accommodate a full-size SUV. For example, a Range Rover Sport is about 71 inches tall. A Toyota Camry is about 56 inches tall. So you could literally stack up, and that stackable lift, mechanical lift, goes up in about 20 seconds. So it's very efficient to pull in. The full mechanism is only 13 inches, and we can go back to it too. So the actual unit is 13 inches. If you could pull your Camry in, you kind of like plug your front tires over this bump so it kind of stays stable. You go up, and it locks in at up to 84 inches. You go up, and then literally an SUV can come behind it. So I think in terms of having the stackable mechanical lifts, it's a very pragmatic solution because it's not like you're going to be sitting there for 2-3 minutes or an extended period of time. It's really that quick to come in and out of that garage. So we felt that in urban living, given that we have smaller space to work with, these would be very compatible and a good solution for this type of project. And the decibel rating is, we put a decibel rating in there in our presentation as well. It's about 52 decibels, which is very quiet. Oh, Minu, I can't get, okay. Those are some additional pictures. You can see how it works. We have a 20-foot deep garage by 25-foot wide. Your typical garage, residential garage, would be about 18 foot to 19 foot, kind of like that builder grade, much of like what you would see in a lot of the small lots that are being built by Pulte Homes or, some of these other builders. These are very wide, so, and because the stacking system, see how it kind of like it X's out the mechanism where it goes up, it's kind of farther up in the front. So, with the width of those units, it's very easy. You have plenty of maneuvering room so that two cars being parked side by side, you can open up your doors on each side with no problem. And the mechanical lift does not create any type of obstruction given our garage floor plan dimensions. So, and it's very easy to use. You literally just press it, move it up, and can move in and out. Okay. I can barely see that. Can I? Yeah, let me. Sorry about that. Okay, and then just to add another thing about this, the mechanical lifts, they support that unit right there that we were showing, supports 6,000 pounds curb weight. A Range Rover Sport or a Toyota 4Runner, these are just what you call standard, maybe what you call them full-size SUVs. One is 4,773 pounds, and the Toyota 4Runner is 4,400 pounds. So they can accommodate even the heavier SUVs. So 12 foot, you add 71 inches, 13 inch for the lift, and a typical sedan, you're still at like 11 and a half foot, and we have a 12-foot ceiling on our first floor all the way across. So these are not any measurements that are not practical or not easy to implement. Over and above that, we do have, because we have 3 units, it was a recommendation by the city to allow for elevators so that if we have any elderly buyers that want to come in and out of the residential units, we did accommodate for an elevator shaft and elevators on both residential units to get to the 3rd floor from garage to 3rd floor. Okay, yeah, and as you can see on the table 2 preliminary trip generation, we have 48 daily traffic count, and our general plan build out allows for 164. And in the AM, it's 6 per day. In the PM, it's 6 per day. Build out is 4 AM, 15 on the PM. So you can see the majority of the traffic is happening in the PM hours, and those office units will be vacant for the most part, unless somebody's working after hours, but that might be like one person. Those would be, for the most part, empty after 5 p.m., 6 p.m., making it completely available for the residential units. So for residential units wanting to have friends over, gatherings, family events, that would free up, I would say, 3 times the required parking that, in a conversation about allowable and minimum parking for residential units, this would free up really like more than enough for those 2 units for evenings, weekdays, and throughout the entire weekend. And we would put all this within a CCNR because we are going to have a condo map and a CCNR, and within that condo plan CCNR, we will implement those rules within within those documents to restrict and to create rules defining what the residential units can do and cannot do, and that would include also the office units, office unit owners. And yeah, that's kind of pretty much it. We've really worked on the overall exterior elevation. We felt that this was a nice balance for the community. It wasn't too modern like the previous one. It had a nice kind of like, I'd kind of almost call it transitional. So it's contemporary, but practical. And in terms of any material uses, it's if the standing seam metal roof wasn't acceptable, we can go to shingle. These are all, we were flexible to making changes as recommended.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Commissioners, are there any questions of the applicant? Commissioner Colbert.
Bobby, thank you for this presentation. I do have one question. It's regarding the mechanical lift. Do you have a maintenance plan for that, or some type of? I don't understand like how they're maintained over the years. Obviously it's going to be going up and down a lot. So, is there like a maintenance plan that you have for the property?
Yeah, the mechanical lift provider is called Stacker. It's a company. They have a warranty plan. They have extended plans. And they're actually, if you go on their website, they're very low maintenance. I mean, it's a pretty basic mechanism. So generally, they'll warranty for the first 5 years on the mechanical lift. It's essentially a $6,000 product, so it's not terribly expensive. And they do, from my conversation with the folks at Stacker, they're relatively easy to maintain, and you just have to put a little bit of lube in there. So it's very easy to maintain.
Okay, Commissioners, Commissioner Zick, and then Commissioner Woods.
Thank you for your presentation. Got a couple of questions for you. First, let me start with the security gate idea. So in the conditions of approval, it says that the parking must be available to all visitors, and implicit in that is that it would be available at all times to all visitors. Obviously, if you installed a security gate and had it closed during the day, that would be a problem. So could you tell me what your plans are relative to a security gate?
Sure. So originally what we had was, in concept, we had 4 garage doors matching. And then it was recommended that we not have garage doors for the 2 office units. And we proposed, to have those security gates, so you understand the background of it, just because we wanted to make sure if there's any transients or homeless people, they couldn't create a problem by sleeping under that carport. So we proposed to do that security gate. And those security gates, they can be provided by our garage door companies that come out, and those are all programmable. So whether it's on your iPad or on a wall unit, they can be timed so that, and they can be programmed so that you can't bring those down during business hours. And then it would be between the two owners, or the 4 owners, to ensure that if somebody was not compliant, there would be notices and fines between the owners to regulate that.
So if there was an additional condition of approval that stated that security gates had to remain in the open position during business hours, that's not something you would have a problem with?
I would not.
Okay. Then I've got a question about that Stacker, a couple of questions about it.
Sure.
Are you familiar with any local installations of the model that you're proposing?
Yes, actually, I have a couple friends of mine that have those in their garages. And they were the ones, I actually called upon them to refer me to a couple different manufacturers, and they recommended this company.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have another question for you about that, but first I have a question for staff. And that is whether or not we would have any interest in the capability or capacity of these lifts, any industrial ratings, UL ratings, or something of that type, whether we would have any interest in ensuring the adequacy of the specific lift. That's my question.
Commissioner Zick, yes, of course, the stacker would have to be tested and certified, so that adding that to the condition, we can add that as well.
I'm not sure I would have the appropriate language to add it, but I think I understand your response. So thank you for that. And so my next question is not whether this is something you'd want to do, but would it be physically possible to install 2 lifts in a 2-car garage in your project?
Yes.
If a homeowner wanted a second lift, is there room to physically install a second one?
Absolutely. We have a 25 wide garage, so it's easy to install 2 of them and get 4 cars in that one garage. Yeah. These residential units, if I may add, these stackable units are very commonplace. They're used for a lot of homeowners that, have, for example, they have cars that they want to store, mainly like you'll see like Ferraris or Porsches. So they're used pretty commonly, just throughout, especially Orange County, where space and room is limited. They don't put it in storage. They usually get something like this, extend their roof in their garage higher if they need to, and then they are able to work that out.
Okay.
In this case, we don't have to make any modifications because we have, per plan, because of the nature of the office component, we have a very tall first floor. So it's just literally, they'll come in, it's a half-a-day install, and it's easy electrical wiring into the unit, and off they go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Woods.
Mr. Chair, if I could clarify.
Yes, ma'am.
Those stackers, they are, because of the weight, the foundation would have to be engineered to carry the weight of the car lift, so it would have to be engineered for either 1 or 2, however the applicant chooses to proceed, and the building permit would be required as to how it would be secured to the foundation.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Commissioner Woods.
Hi, welcome back.
Thank you.
I was wondering if the CCNRs will have any restrictions to the type of structures that a resident can place on the balconies? So like, I would just hate to see like clotheslines out there, or lights or canopies or any sort of privacy screening that would be visible from the street.
Yes, we would include that. We definitely do not want to have clothes hanging.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just supposed to be for patio furniture, outdoor living.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then will there, in the CCNRs, will there be any restrictions for for office hours on the weekends?
No. Well, if the owner wants to come, Sundays, no work days, but if the owner wants to come and pick up their files or go in and work, they could.
But if they wanted to say be open for business?
Yeah, they can't have open business hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Will each unit be sold separately? Will the office be sold separately from the residential units, or are they sold as one package?
I'm going to sell just one duplex, and
Right.
my intent is to sell them as one package.
Okay, so
Yes.
it would be one buyer,
One buyer.
and then
Ideally.
ideally,
Yes.
who purchases, has a true live-work situation.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. That's all the questions I have for now. Thank you.
Anyone else? Vice Chair Harlan.
This is your last these days. Yeah, thank you for that presentation. So I really only have one question, and it's specific to what appears to be the western facade, which was noticeably absent from the video. So it looks like on that side of the property you're to the lot line. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a wall
Right.
that separates our property to the adjacent crematorium.
And so what's the side yard setback for the Neptune Society? You know, if it's,
It's 0.
no, but for their, it looks like their building has got a setback. Is that right?
Are they? Yeah, I believe they're on the lot line.
Okay. So I'm looking at handwritten 47 here.
Yeah,
So is it the lower level that's at the lot line there?
that's correct.
Okay. All right. I mean, the one thing I just want to point out, and I don't know if you had evaluated this at all, but the western facade on handwritten 48 looks like a very large blank space. It shouldn't come as a surprise. So if you had intended to put any kind of windows or fenestration there, even though you do have that proximity to the adjacent neighboring building, I mean, it's likely that building will not necessarily be there forever. So I wouldn't want you necessarily to preclude the opportunity from having, you know, a nicely articulated facade like you've done with the rest of the building.
Yes, we have considered that. Right now, the required setback from Wallace is only 5 foot, and we are actually at 15 foot. And we will, we'll look at it again. I mean, we wanted to get through if we need to move over a foot, 5 foot, we can easily move it over to have a site. We actually talked about this. But we would have to evaluate how that would affect the landscaping. But we have room to move over.
Okay.
To create more room, and we may decide to do that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. Just to be clear, I don't believe there are any requests for deviations on setbacks, correct? Right, okay. So I have just a question in terms of use, and particularly of the office condominiums. You intend to use one of the spaces, and the nature of your business is, if I can ask?
Sure. I have an investment firm. I was previously a banker for Bank of America Securities, and since that time, I started my own investment firm. So part of that is to do developments and just debt financing.
And how often do you see clients or contractors or in the course of your business day?
Almost never.
Okay.
Because I have an established business, so almost 95% of my business is done over the phone and email.
Okay, and what do you anticipate? Do you have any interested tenants in the other office space?
As of right now, no.
Okay, what do you imagine that use might be? I mean, obviously you don't want to limit yourself, but
Yes.
is it an accountant? Is it a?
I'm going to put a limit to a professional office.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
because
some kind of service business.
It'd be yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. All right, those are all the questions I have. Anyone else? Thank you, sir. I will open for public comment. Anybody wish to speak to this item, please come to the podium.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Michelle Figueredo Wilson. I live in this district. I am one block over, right in front of Wahoo's, and the new on the corner. There's a new. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the little 5 new construction. I live in one of those, and I just want to say that I absolutely support this proposal. That corner has, in the short time that it's been vacant, has been nothing but a blight on our specific neighborhood. Now with the new lighthouse shelter that's going to start in April, I'm hoping that a lot of the vagrancy will stop, but until that property is built, I have a sneaky suspicion that it will continue to be a blight on our neighborhood. So the West Side is in dire need of revitalization. I've lived in the West Side for about going on 5 years now. So this is refreshing to see someone who wants to work within the general plan. Of course, you're going to need to tweak some things and make it more flexible, but overall, I just want to say I'm very pleased. I hope this sets a precedent for any new construction and mixed business and livability for anyone who wants to come into the West Side. I'm a little bit concerned of how it's going to work if a homeowner has their lift break down, but hopefully that's something you can work out in your CCNRs. If I may make a recommendation, it does sound like the garage will have the ability to put 4 cars or even 3. In our bylaws and CCNRs, we have it written that we are not allowed to use storage or to use our garages for storage. And what that does is it allows us as newcomers on that block to be more considerate of the parking situation for other residents that have lived there, that are living there. So I just hope maybe that's something you can work in and work with the developer to do. Our garages really need to be, at least for Costa Mesa, for our vehicles now, no storage facilities. And then I had one other comment. I don't remember what it was, but I'll send you an email if I remember. So thank you very much. And your project's beautiful. I really hope to see it come to fruition very, very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wish to speak to this item? Yes, ma'am.
So here's my question. Why do we have zoning at all? Because you're always, this doesn't fit with the zoning, right? So just like what we have right down the street here with Mr. Morehart's property, one property away. Willa changed the zoning to accommodate the John Morehart. I don't understand this. Why do we have zoning? We have a thing, 4 stories south of the 405, live, work, development. How many of these properties that have been sold as live-work development have turned into live-work development? They're usually another bedroom, by the way. No offense, but they are. I'm not saying that's what you're going to do, but that is what is happening. And also, by the way, if this is commercial property, what's to prevent someone from turning the upper level into a restaurant and there's a nice deck outside? Or what's to prevent this from becoming another sober living business, like you have 2 doors down here? It's a perfect setup, I hate to say it. I don't think the West Side needs this. There's nothing wrong with revitalization. There's nothing wrong with new projects. But why are you always giving them more than the zoning? Why? I don't get it. Why bother?
Thank you. Oh,
I remembered what I was going to
well,
suggest.
since we don't have a full house, I will let you go ahead.
I can speak?
Yes.
Okay.
30 seconds.
So we have something in Costa Mesa called the LATE program for businesses that are being affected by homelessness. Even with the new shelter plan, we don't expect homelessness to completely be eradicated or eliminated. So I'm hoping that maybe you can please look into talking with the chief about figuring out a way to have this building just for the businesses eligible for the LATE program, because then that gives them a little bit of more authority to make arrests for lawbreakers or people who are engaging in vagrant activities without having to get a signature. So if you can look into that, I would really appreciate it, because I would be affected.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Stephen Chan, for the record, commissioners and staff. I'm a resident between this building we're speaking in and this project. Between here and there's probably 10 homes, and I've spoken with several of the neighbors that could not make it here on their schedule, and we are all excited to see this thing move forward. I think that what you see before you is something that we've seen before, when staff and an applicant have massaged a project very, very well. I'm very pleased to see this project. I've watched it go through its iterations at this property for, 4 years now, since 2014. And wholeheartedly, Center Street supports this project. Several speakers before me, that also is a resident local to this project, not somebody from some other part of town. And we are just within 10 doors of this project. So please, do your nitpicking if you have to, but this is something that I think should go. With respect to the very first variance, you need an acre. Where are you going to find an acre? Rarely are you going to get an acre of land assembled in this city anymore. And I think that first variance is moot. Thank you so much for your considerations, and once again, kudos to staff.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. Anyone else? Okay, I'll ask the applicant to come back up if they wish to offer any other information. If not, we can move on. Yes, sir.
Bryce Gurney, the architect on the project. Just a quick item of note about the CCNR regarding parking versus storage. There is a condition of approval saying that there will be yearly inspections, voluntary inspections, to ensure that's not the case. So just to address that point.
Okay, thank you. Okay, before I close the public hearing, I want to see if there's any other questions of staff on information that you need in the record. Okay, I do have some questions. First of all, Manu or Barry or Jennifer, the 19 West Urban Plan was adopted what year?
It was adopted in 2006.
And is this the first application we've had since that time requesting an entitlement using the 19 West Urban Plan?
That is correct.
Okay, so
It's
first
the first mixed-use project
in
that's been
13
proposed.
years, okay?
Yes.
I have another question. That would be, would a shared parking agreement based on staggered use require a minor conditional use permit?
Yes,
It would require one,
it would require minor conditional use.
okay?
So this application has been presented as an office use and residential use. Any change to that would trigger additional parking would require a new
Right,
assessment
and
of
so
parking.
I guess this is the crux of the matter, and I, first of all, agree with the last speaker. The idea that a minimum lot size under the 19 Urban West Plan should be an acre is just dumb to me, because one, you can't find an acre, and if somebody had the wherewithal to consolidate parcels to make an acre, they would have, I would assume, done it in the last 13 years. So I don't get that. But here's where I'm really having a problem on the part that what we're requiring from a parking. And I'm going to tell you where I come from, and commissioners can obviously weigh in with their ideas. Personally, if it was one vote, and I wouldn't make them put lifts in. I would say you can use your guest parking spot is going to be outside the garage, off hours. You can use one of the guest parking. I think will be perfectly parked. I think it'll be perfectly fine. I don't like the idea of mechanical lifts. I certainly wouldn't require them to put two in the garage. But I think based on the use that Mr. Kanashi talked about, Kashani, I'm sorry, I don't know that this is ever going to be underparked. And so we have these standards. Interestingly, we have this 19 West Urban Plan that creates kind of a unique regulatory environment apart from the regular zoning code to kind of incentivize revitalization. And yet we require the same non-residential parking standards in the 19 West Urban Plan that we do in the normal parking standards for a zoning code. That just makes no sense to me. And yet we provide some modification to residential parking standards versus our normal parking standards. So this is what's wrong with, and the council I know wants to look at these urban plans and tweak them and modify them, and I think that's great because I think they need to be tweaked and modified. But from my perspective, this has been an inordinately patient applicant who, maybe not him personally, but this has gone through 4 iterations of look-sees by the governing bodies of this city. Essentially, it's been pulled through a keyhole. And what the plan that I see in front of me tonight is really astonishingly clever and beautiful, that they can create a 15-foot setback on the eastern side and create what looks like a gorgeous landscape plan. To me, I have no problem with the deviation on the open. I mean, they meet the parking requirement in terms of the 19. They don't from the open perspective. I personally don't think, I don't think they need to do the lifts, but I could be wrong and my fellow commissioners might disagree. But if we're going to do that, we have to do a minor conditional use permit, apparently. So that's just my wish. But since we're not here with that in front of us tonight in terms of an application, I'll defer to that and we'll see what happens. But those are just kind of generally my comment. This is a weed-infested vacant lot. When I visited there, some guy in the apartment building to the north was tossing his trash over the fence into the vacant lot as we were speaking. And it just, there's nothing there. And I just think from an architectural perspective, it's beautiful. I think scaling, it's great. I think it uses the land well. There's plenty of open space. I think it's just really clever. And so I'm in favor of the project. So any other?
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, I should close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you,
Mr.
Vice Chair.
Chairman.
Commissioner Zick.
Before you close the public
Yes.
hearing, I actually had a question. I've got comments also, but I'll save those till after it's closed and we have a motion. The questions I have for staff deal with each of the two deviations. So on the minimum 1 acre requirement, could you help me understand where that comes from, what the rationale is, why that's important?
Commissioner Zick, the idea of the 1 acre was so that some lots could be consolidated, and because these development standards are more lenient, that a project would have sufficient land so that it could stand alone and would blend into the neighborhood as a larger project versus a smaller project.
Okay, and then with regard to the second deviation, so I need a little bit of help with the arithmetic. The deviation says that there's a requirement for 19 parking spaces with a minimum of 15 open spaces. And on page 7 of the staff report, you identify 10 open spaces, and I can count those on the site plan. And then 3 carport spaces, and I'll pause there for a question. Are the 3 carport spaces not considered open?
They are not. They are considered covered parking per our code.
Okay, so if we have the 10 open and the 3 carport, we're up to 13. And if we get 1 credit for the mechanical lift, we're at 14. Help me with the math. I don't see on page 7 where the required even shows 15. It says we require 14, so help me with that math, please.
14 spaces for the office use and 1 mechanical lift per unit, and then there's 1 credit for the bike rack. So, I'm sorry, I think I'm missing something.
Could it be that that 15 is a typo on the page 2 of the staff report?
Page 2. Page 3. Why is it?
They'll figure it out.
19. And this 1 bike credit. So that's required, provided. I don't think there's a typo. The office use is 14 spaces. I'm sorry if there's a reference on page 3 that says otherwise, that's not accurate. So it's 14 spaces for office use and 3 spaces per unit, 1 including a mechanical lift for a total of 19. And 20 is required. The applicant receives a credit for 1 parking space because of the bike rack.
Okay, so if you bear with me for a moment then, it would seem that that this project has 1 deviation relative to the 1 acre minimum development lot requirement. Mm-hmm. And it would seem to me then that the second deviation isn't related to the number of parking spaces, right, but is related only to the fact that there are 3 carport spaces that are covered as opposed to 3 open spaces.
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions of staff? Okay, then I will close the public hearing. Thank you, Vice Chair Harlan. Be lost without you. And we'll bring it up to the dais and see if there's any comments on the application or motions. Commissioner Woods.
I will make the motion that we adopt a resolution and find that the project is categorically exempt from the provisions of CEQA, per CEQA guidelines, section 15.332, and approved planning application 18-47, and tentative track map 18-034, subject to conditions of approval.
I will second that.
You know, I was one of the commissioners that initially denied the previous project, and I just want to congratulate you on bringing forth a great project. I can tell that you really, really listened, and I know you've been through a lot, but this is kind of what we were looking for. We're looking for a live-work unit that evokes the spirit and the intent of the 19 West Urban Plan, and I think you guys did a terrific job in achieving that. Huge improvements. The ADA space is well located. I really appreciate that. Ground level open space is increased. I really appreciate that. I don't care too much about balcony and how our zoning code allows that as open space, but you did it on the ground level, and that's all that matters to me. You consolidated the buildings, and that definitely allowed more flexibility in what you could do with this parcel. You maintained the privacy of the residential units, which I think was a problem with the last project, and you increased parking. So thank you for keeping at it and not getting discouraged by the no's, but you finally brought forward something that's just great, and I think that something our whole community could be proud of. So thanks.
Okay, Commissioners, any other comments? Commissioner Zick.
So I'll be supporting the motion. I think it's a beautifully architecture design that you've come up with. But what I also appreciate is that you were responsive to the council's comments and concerns at the screening. Not 100%, but I think with good intention and with the right spirit. The council was concerned about the impracticality of mechanical lifts for guest parking. So you've only used those for the resident parking, where presumably the familiarity, the training would be not an issue. They were concerned about the massing of 3 stories, and the way you set back that 3rd story makes it a very attractive building. It has really the genuine appearance of a 2-story building, and I think that's not out of character now with the surrounding development. Clearly, the project fulfills the goals of the urban plan. And I just think it's a really good-looking project for the area. When we have residents that speak in favor of a project, that's always a good sign. That's kind of a rare thing. That's a good thing for you. Kind of a bit of a surprise. The idea about us giving variances and deviations. I think the 1 acre minimum lot development deviation is very easy to explain, and it's very understandable why that deviation is granted. The deviation relative to the parking is kind of an interesting one, the deviation, because technically you're providing a higher quality parking space that is covered as opposed to a requirement for an open. Although I think the implication as a carport might not be as welcoming to a guest. They may think there's special privilege for that, which is why I think that is a concern. But I think you're meeting the requirements, and the fact that you're not asking for setback variances, I'm always encouraged by that. You've designed within the constraints of the code. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioners. Vice Chair Harlan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm inclined to support the motion, and I concur with a lot of the comments with regards to the architectural design. I think most people would say this is a very handsome design and seems appropriate for the area. But where I do have a few reservations is As I had noted before, the western facade looks like it doesn't rise to the level of the same architectural design you have on the other three. So if there's ways to incorporate some fenestration, some articulation, I'm not necessarily saying set it back more, but that might provide you a little better of an option. But, you know, think in the future that, like I said, that other building adjacent might not be there. I wouldn't want you to preclude that opportunity to have a really stellar design on all four sides. The other reservation I have, and I'm surprised nobody actually has raised this, is just the general land use of having office like this on 19th. I don't object to office, but I think if 19th is intended to be a street that has some vitality, what has been proposed so far as far as an office, Mr. Kashani, you seem to be a sole proprietor, sole operator. One person in 1,700 square feet of office space doesn't necessarily lend itself to a lot of street activity. So, you know, I balance that against the fact that we haven't had any development in 13 years in this urban plan area, and we are desperate for new investment. So I think that what has proposed on balance is the right thing, and I do appreciate that. But like I said, I think that the use itself may leave a little bit to be desired. So office and live work is always kind of a mixed bag, no pun intended. But overall, I would support this.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Colbert?
Bobby, again, thank you for your diligence and creativity with this project. I am inclined also to support it. I obviously don't have the history like my fellow commissioners with seeing it, but to see something like this on the first go, it's the first iteration for me. It looks amazing, and hopefully I'm looking forward to the development and good parking.
Great. Thank you, Commissioners, for your comments. Call for the question.
That motion carries 5-0.
Okay, and that decision is final unless appealed to the City Council within 7 days. Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck. Okay, and that brings us to staff reports. And Mr. Mejia, we'll start with you on, let me find my page, Public Services Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I would like to update you on a few projects that are currently under construction. The first one is the replacement of a storm drain pipe that went across Newport Boulevard just north of Del Mar. That work took place very quickly and would replace an existing corrugated metal pipe that had eroded completely, and it was beginning to show the signs of a sinkhole. When we replaced it with reinforced concrete pipe, and we hope not to worry about this one for the next 100 years. The work went well. Were quite a few challenges that we had to work through. One of those is working with Caltrans and obtaining permits, as we had to close that on-ramp temporarily while we went across the street. We also had to work in between some very important utilities that are run down Newport Boulevard, including transmission, water mains, and gas mains. That work is now complete, it's in full service. We did most of the work at night, again, to reduce traffic and to comply with Caltrans requirements. The other project is the construction of landscape medians on Red Hill Avenue between Bristol Street and north of Palomino Avenue. That work is now substantially complete. We should be wrapping up that project by the end of the week with the last planting, and that came out really nice. And the last project that I'd like to provide an update is the City Council Chambers upgrades. As you know, that is two public works projects that we put together. One is the actual upgrade of the room itself, and there's a separate project for the audio-video equipment. Both of those projects are moving along well. Most of the audio-video equipment is now installed inside the rooms. The equipment rooms, we are also finished the upgrades to the same rooms where the equipment is going to be, as well as another room that I don't recall if I updated you on this, but at the same time that we are doing the City Council chamber upgrade, we are also repurposing an old print shop that we had, and that room itself has also been completed with all of the improvements, and the only thing that remains is the installation of the audio-video equipment. For the City Council chambers, a lot of work has already taken place in that room too, and just last week we completed the removal of the old seats, and now we're preparing the flooring for the installation of the new carpet, and subsequently the installation of new seats for the chambers. We're still on target to finish the work by June, and hopefully we'll have it open as soon as all the training and all the work is complete. That concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Mejia. One question, will the new seats have cup holders? Never mind.
I'm sorry.
Never mind. Okay, never mind. Okay, Mr. Curtis, Development Services Report.
Nothing this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and City Attorney?
Nothing, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Again, thank you, Commissioners, for your service and your work on all these applications, and we'll stand adjourned until the regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting of March 25th. Good night.